So picture this. It is like 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. You are finally in your pajamas, sitting on the couch, just trying to decompress from an absolutely brutal day in the classroom.
Oh, yeah. We know that feeling.
Right. And then your phone buzzes. It's an alert from your school email. And it's a furious parent demanding to know why their child failed a project that, by the way, they had 3 weeks to complete.
Of course they did.
But somehow, the tone of this email implies that this is entirely your fault. Instantly, your heart rate spikes. Your cortisol just floods your system.
Yep, the evening is totally ruined.
Completely ruined. And you spend the next 2 hours drafting and deleting these, like, desperate apologies for a failure that you didn't even cause. I mean, we've all been there.
So many times.
And there is this unspoken, just utterly exhausting reality that so many of you listening right now deal with every single day.
Yeah.
It's what the source material calls the hero-teacher complex.
Right. That crushing expectation that you and you alone are the sole engine of your student's success.
Exactly. And that scenario, that exact late-night panic, is what we are dismantling today.
It really is. Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're digging into sources surrounding this concept called the anatomy of the peaceful email.
Which sounds amazing, by the way.
Doesn't it? The mission here is a total transformation of your daily reality. We want to take your practice from that state of, constant emotional burnout to what the framework calls pedagogical peace.
And the way to get there is, well, it actually might surprise you.
Yeah, it isn't about working harder or caring more. It's actually about using factual, dispassionate documentation as this sort of impenetrable professional shield.
Okay, so let's really unpack this because we are looking at some incredibly practical source materials today. We've got synthesis documents, tactical checklists, real-world case studies pulled directly from the Peaceful Educator framework.
Very tactical stuff.
Right. And as I was combing through all these strategies, this very specific image just kept popping into my head.
Oh, what was that?
Well, the way we're currently forced to operate in education, it feels like trying to run a marathon on behalf of someone else.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like you are out there pounding the pavement, sweating, just tearing your muscles up, and the person you're actually running for is just sitting on the sideline.
Just watching you.
Exactly. They aren't getting any fitter, but you are the one collapsing from exhaustion.
That analogy hits the core of the problem so perfectly, because the tools we're exploring today, they're essentially a manual for how to hand those running shoes back to the student.
Right, which we desperately need.
We do, but to do that effectively, we have to start with this massive philosophical shift. Before we even look at how to draft a boundary-setting email, you have to genuinely give yourself permission to let go of that hero guilt.
Which is so hard. It's so ingrained in the culture.
It is. We need to redefine what good teaching actually means. And crucially, we need to base that definition on empirical research rather than, this culture of teacher martyrdom.
Yeah, the framework actually calls that traditional model the sage on the stage.
The transmitter of all knowledge.
Right, the transmitter. And it is just not sustainable. You spend your whole day performing, managing behaviors, and then absorbing all the blame for a student's lack of intrinsic effort.
It's exhausting.
It is. You're constantly trying to control the uncontrollable, like a student's home life or, I don't know, their sleep schedule. It completely drains your empathy.
It drains your empathy, and honestly, the irony is that it's highly inefficient for actual student learning.
Wait, really? The harder we work, the less efficient it is.
Exactly. And this is where the research provides you with your first line of defense. The sources bring in John Hattie's visible learning data.
Okay, give us some context on Hattie for those who might not know.
Sure. So Hattie conducted this massive synthesis. He analyzed over 80,000 smaller studies to determine what pedagogical strategies actually work in a classroom.
Wow, 80,000. That's a lot of data.
It is. And he measures something called the effect size. In his model, an effect size of 0.40 is considered the hinge point.
Meaning what exactly?
That's the equivalent of a student achieving 1 year of academic growth in 1 year of time.
Okay, so 0.40 is a standard, solid year of growth. So what does this mean for that exhausted transmitter teacher we just talked about?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the transmitter approach, where the teacher owns all the facts, does all the talking, does all the cognitive heavy lifting, that actually hovers well below that 0.40 hinge point.
You're kidding. So the teacher doing the most work gets the least results.
Yeah, because the person doing the talking is the person doing the learning. I mean, if you lecture for 45 minutes, your brain is growing, but the students' brains are totally passive.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So what's the alternative?
Hattie highlights becoming what he calls an activator, or the lead learner.
An activator. I like that.
Right. This is an educator who provides the goal, builds the tools, and then intentionally steps back. You let the students struggle and do the actual thinking.
And what's the effect size on that?
That approach yields a massive effect size of 0.60 or higher.
Okay, let's just ground that 0.60 in reality.
Yeah.
You're saying that by stepping back and doing less talking, students are getting, what, a year and a half's worth of growth in a single year?
Precisely. Accelerating learning requires productive struggle.
But let's be real for a second, because I'm thinking about the lived reality of the educator listening to this right now.
Sure.
When a student is failing and you step back to let them, lead their learning, administration doesn't usually see an activator.
No, they don't.
They see a teacher who isn't doing enough. And parents see a teacher who just doesn't care. So how does this research protect you when your principal is literally standing in your doorway, demanding to know why Johnny has a D-?
That is the central friction of this entire transition, and it's exactly why the framework insists on adopting what they call the Zen Mountain mindset before you do anything else.
Zen Mountain. Okay, what is that?
On Zen Mountain, you just have to accept the uncomfortable truth that you cannot control another human being's effort.
Wow. Simple, but hard to swallow.
Extremely hard. But you have to focus exclusively on your circle of control, and that circle only consists of your pedagogy, your structural boundaries, and your professional integrity.
Okay, so when the principal is in the doorway,
You don't defend your character. You point to your pedagogy. You tell them that stepping back isn't you being lazy. It's a required, scientifically backed strategy. If you do the work for Johnny, Johnny's brain does not grow.
that completely shifts the perspective.
Mm.
You're refusing to steal their cognitive struggle.
Exactly.
I really appreciate that framing.
Hmm.
But, philosophy's only half the battle. A Zen mindset doesn't stop my phone from buzzing at 9:45 p.m.
No, it doesn't.
So how do we actually operationalize this piece?
Hmm.
Especially when the outside world is constantly demanding unrestricted access to our time.
Well, this requires establishing physical and digital structures way before conflict ever arises.
Right. Be proactive.
Exactly. The first tactical tool the framework introduces is the sunset rule.
Which I love, by the way.
It's a game changer. It's a formal written notification that you send to all stakeholders at the start of the year. So parents, students, administration.
And it basically says what?
It explicitly states that you only respond to messages within a 24 business hour window.
I cannot emphasize enough how crucial this is for your baseline mental health. The framework points out that this boundary creates a predictable environment.
And the psychology behind that predictability is huge.
Yeah. When parents know your rule is 24 hours, that immediate urgency just dissipates. And for you, it means you can actually remain fully present for the students in front of you during the day instead of nervously checking your inbox between periods.
Yeah, it totally lowers the temperature for everyone. But, and this is a big but, the sunset rule only works if it's paired with what the sources call the digital anchor.
Ah, right, the digital anchor.
You have to designate your official school email or a specific district-approved classroom app as your absolute sole communication channel.
Because it creates a permanent time-stamped paper trail.
Exactly. A permanent paper trail is your absolute best defense against shifting narratives. Phone calls do not provide that.
Right, because phone calls are just vibes, basically.
Pretty much. If a parent is upset, a phone call is purely subjective. It relies on tone and memory and high emotion. An email is objective data.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. And honestly, this solves a nightmare scenario that every veteran teacher knows intimately.
Let's hear.
We have all been ambushed in the hallway. You're rushing to unclog the copy machine during your 20-minute prep period, and an administrator just corners you.
The worst.
And they casually, misremember a conversation from last week, or suddenly imply that you agreed to chair the spring dance committee.
Right.
Or a parent catches you at a basketball game and twists your words about their kid's behavior. In those moments, you didn't have a chance to use your digital anchor beforehand. You're just trapped.
Those subjective he said, she said hallway moments are incredibly dangerous. They rely entirely on the power dynamic of the ambush.
So what's the move?
The solution provided in the framework is brilliantly simple. They call it the post-conversation anchor.
Okay, how does that work?
You don't fight the battle in the hallway. You nod, you extract yourself, and the literal second you get back to your computer, you send a 2-sentence follow-up email.
Let me guess. It is not a paragraph defending yourself.
Not at all. It reads, "Good morning. To confirm our brief conversation in the hallway today, we agreed on X task. I have documented this for our records to ensure we are on the same page."
I have documented this for our records. That phrasing is so incredibly powerful.
Isn't it?
It's relentlessly polite, it is entirely professional, but it just completely shuts down any administrative gaslighting.
Yeah.
You're taking this subjective, manipulative moment and just freezing it in objective amber.
That's a great way to put it. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, once you have those communication boundaries locked down, you can safely navigate the actual day-to-day conflicts of the classroom.
Right, because you've protected your time.
Exactly. So now the question is, how do you protect your energy when a student simply refuses to engage with the material?
Oh man, this is the hardest part. Because even with the best boundaries in the world, student apathy happens.
It does.
And we are mandated to document our interventions, right? But without lowering our academic standards.
Wow.
In the sources, they call the old exhausting way of handling this the curriculum crush.
Oh, the curriculum crush.
I remember doing this early in my career. You have a student who is completely disengaged, so you spend 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon creating like 5 different watered-down versions of the exact same worksheet.
Just hoping one of them is easy enough to tempt the kid into doing it.
Exactly. It feels like you're just handing them busy work just so they can pass. It's exhausting for the teacher, and frankly, it's undignified for the student.
It really is. It's the total antithesis of the activator mindset we talked about. You're doing all the sweating again.
Right. So what does the framework suggest instead?
They introduced this concept called dignified differentiation. The core mechanism here is that you keep the universal concept high for every single person in the room, but you change the access point.
Okay, so you aren't lowering the ceiling of the curriculum. You're just putting in an elevator. Like everyone was going to the top floor, but you're offering different doors to get into the building.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. Let's look at the specific social studies case study provided in the sources.
Okay, yeah, walk us through it.
So the teacher is covering a unit on environmental impact. And the universal concept they want to teach is interdependence. Now, the old SAGE method would be to stand at the front and just lecture for 3 days straight to get through 20 historical subtopics.
Which guarantees half the room puts their heads down on their desks.
Naturally. But using dignified differentiation, the teacher introduces that core concept of interdependence for just 10 minutes.
Just 10 minutes.
Just 10 minutes. Then they provide 3 distinct doors for the students to choose from to explore that concept on their own.
Got it. What are the doors?
Door A is academic, so perhaps analyzing a primary source environmental law document. Door B is narrative. They read a story. The sources mention one called I Am Milo, which personifies a local ecosystem's collapse.
Oh, I like that.
And door C is visual. They analyze this complex, detailed infographic of a biological feedback loop.
What I love about this is that no one is being tracked into lower level thinking. I mean, even if a student has severe dyslexia or they're an English language learner, they are still grappling with the high-level, sophisticated concept of interdependence. The vocabulary in the narrative isn't necessarily stripped down. It's just a different modality.
You have completely optimized the environment for their success. You fulfilled your professional mandate to the absolute highest degree.
Yeah, this raises an important question. And I know it's the emotional friction point for so many educators.
What happens if they still don't do it?
Exactly. What happens when you build those beautiful, differentiated doors and the student still just sits there, stares at the wall, and refuses to engage?
It's genuinely painful.
It goes against every instinct you have as a caring adult. You got into this profession to help kids succeed. Just watching a kid fail after you've built the door feels wrong. It feels like you are failing them.
And see, that guilt is exactly what the hero-teacher complex preys upon. But that is the exact moment where your emotional labor must officially stop and the factual documentation begins. When apathy strikes, you use the inform and move on protocol.
Inform and move on.
It's a dispassionate email template designed to satisfy your professional mandate without absorbing the consequences of the student's choice.
Okay, let's break down the psychology of this template, because I know there are 3 specific components to it. How does the first step work?
The first step is a fact-based observation. You clearly and plainly state what the student did or did not do. Johnny did not complete the assignment on interdependence during the 50-minute class period.
Very dry.
Yes, you must ruthlessly remove all emotional phrases. You do not say, I am frustrated with Johnny's lack of effort, or I am worried about his grade.
I see why that matters. Because if you say, I'm worried, you're inadvertently inviting the parent to attack your judgment.
Exactly.
The parent feels guilty that their kid is failing, so they lash out at the teacher's emotional assessment. But if you just state the fact, he didn't do the work, there is no emotional hook for them to latch onto and argue against.
You completely remove the target. The second step is to explicitly state the dignified access point you provided.
So what does that look like?
You write, to help Johnny access this concept, I provided a visual map and a narrative story option. This step is critical because it proves to any administrator or parent reading that email that you didn't just hand the kid a textbook and say, good luck.
Right. You are proving that the environment was fully optimized. The failure is not a result of a lack of resources.
Exactly right. And the third and final step is the transfer of responsibility. You state cleanly and clearly that the next step for mastery resides with the student or the home.
Oh, wow.
You write, the materials remain available on our digital platform. I encourage Johnny to review them this evening. And then you end the email.
Wait. You don't ask the parent for a phone call. You don't offer to sacrifice your lunch break for the next 3 days to reteach the entire lesson one-on-one.
You do not. You inform and you move on.
So it's literally just, I am writing to inform you that Johnny did not complete the assignment on interdependence today. I provided a visual map access point to support his learning. The materials are on the digital platform, and the next step for mastery resides with Johnny. I have documented this for our records.
That's it.
I gotta say, saying it out loud feels incredibly liberating.
Yeah.
But it also feels detached, almost cold.
It feels detached because you are breaking an addiction to other people's emergencies.
Oof, that's real.
It is intentional detachment. It forces everyone involved to confront what the framework calls the Zen truth of this entire process. And that is, you are responsible for providing the door. You are not responsible for the student refusing to walk through it.
You are responsible for providing the door. You are not responsible for the student refusing to walk through it. That is a mantra that needs to be framed above every teacher's desk.
Truly.
But let's play this out to its logical conclusion. You've sent the dispassionate email. You've moved on. The parent is unhappy that you aren't bending over backwards, so they complain to the principal.
Which happens.
Right, and the administration calls you into the office and says, we need you to do more for Johnny. We need to see more effort. Now you are in the hot seat. How does this system actually serve as a shield in that terrifying moment?
This brings us to the final piece. Admin proofing your piece. If you're going to stand your ground against a culture that demands you do everything, you need data.
But documentation can be a nightmare.
Right. As the sources point out, documentation can easily become a second unpaid job if you aren't careful. Writing paragraphs in a logbook every day is completely unsustainable. So the framework provides a tool called the Pulse Sheet.
I was actually looking at the pulse sheet in the tactical checklist.
Yeah.
It is remarkably simple. It's just a single grid with your students' names down the side and dates across the top.
Yeah.
But you aren't writing words, right? You're just using codes.
Correct. You use an exclamation point to note a behavioral incident. You use an M to denote a missed milestone or a conceptual goal they skipped. And you use an X on the day you sent that inform and move on email.
So it takes, what, 3 seconds to update?
2 seconds. So when that administrator demands to know if you've done enough for Johnny, you don't get defensive. You don't argue emotion or character. You pull up the pulse sheet.
You literally just look at the grid and say, I have documented 7 reasonable effort attempts via email on these specific dates. I provided visual and narrative access points. The paper trail is complete.
Exactly. It completely neutralizes the attack because you aren't defending your personality. You're presenting indisputable data.
Data removes the oxygen from an irrational argument.
It really does. But there's a logistical side to this piece as well. The sources describe something called the search and stress cycle.
Oh, I know that cycle. That is the sheer panic you feel when an admin asks for proof, and you are frantically digging through thousands of unorganized emails while your heart is just pounding.
Yes. To eliminate that, you must use an inbox folder system.
The psychology of the inbox is huge. The framework suggests 3 folders, right?
Yes. The first is positive. For those rare, lovely emails you get from a grateful parent or former student, you keep those for your sanity on the hard days.
I love that. And the second?
The second is action needed. which is for active inform and move on threads where you're waiting on a student to submit something.
Okay, makes sense.
And the third folder is where the magic happens. Admin review. Whenever you receive an irrational request, a highly aggressive communication from a parent, or anything that feels like it crosses a professional line and might need to be escalated.
You do not let it sit in your main inbox.
Never.
Because every time you log in to check a normal message, you see that angry subject line and your cortisol spikes all over again.
Exactly. You drag it into the admin review folder immediately. You file it away and you deal with it on your terms, maybe during a designated prep period, rather than letting it poison your entire day.
It is entirely about reclaiming your professional sovereignty. But I think it's vital to point out a major caveat the framework includes here. Reclaiming your sovereignty does not mean building a fortress and isolating yourself from your colleagues. In fact, if you try to do this entirely alone, it might backfire.
Oh, isolation is the fastest track to burnout. The framework emphasizes shared sovereignty.
Shared sovereignty.
The goal is to break down the closed-door culture that plagues so many modern schools, where everyone is just suffering in silence in their own rooms. You collaborate with your peers not to complain or to judge each other's test scores, but to practically share the load.
Right. Think about the dignified differentiation we talked about earlier. If I am building the visual access point for the interdependence unit, and you are building the narrative access point down the hall, we just cut our workload in half.
We share the template.
Yes. And more importantly, we review each other's inform and move on emails before we hit send.
Having a colleague read your email to ensure it's truly dispassionate and fact-based is invaluable. It is about collective boundary setting. When an entire department or a whole grade-level team utilizes the sunset rule and the inform and move on template, it trains the community.
It sets a new unified standard for what professional communication actually looks like at your school.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner, the educator, who started this deep dive feeling exhausted and overwhelmed? It means a profound systemic sense of relief.
It really does.
It means redefining what a successful day actually looks like. Under the old hero-teacher model, success meant dragging every single student across the finish line, even if it cost you your physical health, your evenings, and your sanity.
But by embracing the role of the activator, by relying on your digital anchor and utilizing that dispassionate inform and move on template, success looks completely different.
How so?
Success becomes creating a high-level, research-backed, highly accessible learning environment where the student is invited and expected to lead their own learning. And most importantly, the teacher goes home when the bell rings with their peace intact.
You go home with your peace intact. I mean, that's the dream. So here is your call to action based on everything we've unpacked today. Implement the sunset rule today. Put it in your syllabus, pin it to the top of your digital classroom, put it in your email signature, set the 24-hour boundary, and start using the poll sheet tomorrow. Stop writing emotional essays in your gradebook notes and start using the codes. Get your time back.
It is a fundamental transition from tactical survival to true pedagogical peace. But before we wrap up our exploration of these sources, there's one final provocative question I want you to mull over as you walk into your classroom tomorrow morning.
Let's hear it.
We've spent this time talking about how these boundaries protect your peace, your time, and your mental health. But think about the student.
Okay.
If we constantly absorb the consequences of our students' choices out of our own internal hero guilt, are we actually protecting them? Or are we quietly stealing their opportunity to learn how to rescue themselves?
Wow. We are running the marathon for them and wondering why their legs give out when the real world demands they cross a finish line on their own. Hand them the shoes, provide the door, and let them walk through it.